I am Nathan Carter, 45 years old, a senior software engineer in Willow Creek, California. I once believed family always came first. When my in-laws and my wife's brother needed a place to stay, I opened my home's doors without hesitation. 8 months, over $10,000 in living expenses, and countless sleepless nights later, I found myself sleeping in my car after my wife Megan coldly said, "If you don't like living with family, you can leave." The irony, right? It was my house, mortgaged in my name, my rules trampled. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. I've always been the responsible one in the family. After graduating college with an outstanding engineering degree, I joined a tech company, climbing to senior software engineer after 18 years. Through careful budgeting and overtime, I saved enough to put a down payment on a 3-bedroom house in Pine Hollow, a peaceful suburb with tree-lined streets and good schools. I love this place. Not luxurious but mine, bought with sweat and tears. The small garden with a few apple trees and mint bushes is where I unwind. The office, where I drink coffee on weekends, is my perfect private space. The living room occasionally serves as a guest bedroom, but guests rarely come by. Our family often gathered at Harold and Vivian's, a 2-story house they bought 3 decades ago. Weekend dinners were a tradition, with Harold's grilled chicken or Vivian's beef stew, where we laughed and joked. Ethan sometimes brought his girlfriend, and I occasionally invited friends. We weren't perfect, but close in a comfortable way, each with our own space. Everything changed when crisis hit. The tech industry faced major layoffs, and Ethan lost his job. At the same time, Harold had heart issues. Not too serious, but medical bills exceeded insurance coverage. Rising property taxes made them unable to pay their mortgage. I remember the weekend dinner when everything fell apart. No more laughter or cheerful chatter, just heavy silence. Vivian's eyes were red. Harold stared at his plate. Ethan checked his phone anxiously. "We need to talk," Harold said, his voice unusually soft. "The bank sent a foreclosure notice yesterday." Vivian sobbed quietly. "We've tried everything, called everyone. Aunt Clara can't help, she's still paying her daughter's tuition. Uncle Henry's drowning in debt." Ethan looked up from his phone. "My savings are gone. Unemployment benefits are pennies, and the job market's awful." I sat there spoon frozen midair. As the picture became clear, my wife's family was about to be homeless, with nowhere to turn. The solution seemed obvious. "Then you can stay with me until you're back on your feet." I heard myself say, "The living room for mom and dad, Ethan on the couch. Just temporary, maybe 2-3 months." The relief on their faces was palpable. Megan hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Harold's eyes welled up, and Ethan fist-bumped me across the table. "We'll help with groceries and cleaning," Vivian promised. "You won't even notice we're there," Ethan said. "First paycheck I get, I'll contribute. Just until insurance settles and we find a new place," Harold affirmed. 3 months tops. We spent the evening planning. They'd bring only essentials, storing the rest at Uncle Henry's. Vivian would cook dinners since I often worked late. Ethan would handle mowing the lawn and taking out the trash. Harold would fix small things I'd neglected. The plan seemed solid, like a family uniting to overcome a crisis. I had no idea this generosity would plunge me into a painful journey, where I'd have to relearn the true meaning of family and boundaries. The day my wife's family moved into my house in Pine Hollow went surprisingly smoothly. I spent the morning cleaning, clearing space in closets and drawers, putting fresh sheets on the living room beds, and stocking the fridge with all kinds of food. There was an almost festive atmosphere as we arranged their stuff. Harold brought a few suitcases and an old toolbox. Vivian carried carefully packed clothing bags, and Ethan dragged a huge backpack and some electronics boxes. Megan busied herself helping her mom hang new curtains in the living room, while Ethan and I carried an old couch to a corner for his bed. "Thank you, Nathan," Vivian said, her eyes still bearing traces of recent worry. "We wouldn't know what to do without you." I just smiled, waving it off like it was no big deal. We ended that day with takeout pizza, gathered in the living room watching an old comedy on TV. Harold's laughter echoed when the main character took a pratfall, and Ethan shared stories about a startup he'd worked at. Megan leaned on my shoulder, whispering, "You're amazing for doing this." My heart warmed, believing this was just a short phase, that things would soon return to normal. Those first few weeks were just as I'd hoped. Vivian cooked amazing meals, beef stew with potatoes, creamy pasta, or fragrant meatloaf sandwiches. I'd come home after long days, smell food from afar, and feel re-energized. Harold fixed a leaky kitchen faucet and replaced a porch light bulb, tasks I'd put off forever. Ethan kept the lawn tidy, even sweeping leaves from the driveway. He took out the trash on time, sometimes washing my car without being asked. I was surprised by their thoughtfulness, thinking I'd worried too much about living together. To adjust, I tweaked my work schedule. I'd wake up early, taking conference calls at 6 a.m. from my office before anyone stirred. Christine, my boss, was understanding when I explained the situation. "Family comes first, Nathan," she said. "Work remotely more if needed. Just keep projects on track." I appreciated her flexibility and did my best to maintain performance. My office was well soundproofed, helping me focus despite the fuller house. Each morning, I'd brew coffee, sit by the window overlooking Pine Hollow streets, feeling everything was still under control. Living expenses skyrocketed faster than I expected. Electricity and water bills doubled with 3 extra adults in the house. Groceries, which I'd managed carefully on a modest budget, tripled. My cheap coffee vanished, replaced by a pricey premium brand. Organic vegetables, prime beef, and expensive brands filled the fridge and pantry. I didn't complain right away, but when I saw the grocery bill, I was stunned. Over $1,200 in a single month, not counting other costs like car repairs since Harold frequently borrowed it for doctor visits. In total, after 8 months, I'd spent over $10,000 supporting my wife's family. When I gently brought up costs with Vivian, she seemed hurt. "I thought you wanted us to feel at home," she said, her tone slightly reproachful. "Now we eat together as a family, so costs naturally go up." I nodded, not wanting to upset her, but inwardly began worrying about my savings meant for the future. Space in the house grew cramped. Ethan, who initially kept the couch neat, now scattered his stuff across the living room. Backpacks, charging cables, shoes and jackets clogged the walkways. Once, I nearly tripped over a Bluetooth speaker box left in the middle of the floor. My office, which I always kept tidy, showed signs of intrusion. I found one of Ethan's coffee mugs left on my desk, right next to my work laptop. When I asked, he just shrugged. "I forgot to clean up, don't stress." I tried to stay calm, but unease crept in. Vivian and Harold were no exception. They rearranged the kitchen cabinets without asking, moving pots, pans, and spices to their system. "This way's much more convenient," Vivian said when I questioned it. I didn't argue, but every time I opened a cabinet to find something, I felt like I was in someone else's house. Noise became another issue. My office was well soundproofed, but Harold's TV, often blaring football games or news shows, sometimes seeped through. Ethan gamed late into the night, with gunfire sounds and shouts through his headset echoing through the walls. Once, during a client call, I had to apologize for background noise. "Big family, please bear with me," I said, forcing a laugh, but I was embarrassed inside. My colleague Tom noticed my stress in weekly meetings. "Everything okay, Nathan?" he asked after a meeting where I responded sluggishly. "Just adjusting to a full house," I replied, trying to sound casual. "They'll move out soon." Back then I still believed that. Megan was the only one I hoped would understand, but she increasingly sided with her family. When I complained about the pile of dirty dishes in the sink, she said, "Mom's doing her best, Nathan. She cooks for everyone. Cleaning up a bit isn't hard." When I mentioned Ethan's stuff, she said, "My brother's stressed about job hunting. Cut him some slack." I tried to be understanding, but every conversation made me feel like the complainer in my own home. Megan was still gentle, still hugged me on the rare evenings we had alone. But I realized she didn't see the issues as seriously as I did. "Just a few more months, honey," she said, echoing the initial promise. I nodded, but inside I started doubting whether a few months would ever come. My work held up, thanks to Christine's support. She let me work remotely more, but I had to start earlier to avoid noise. I still met deadlines, but no longer had time to prepare as thoroughly as before. Once I sent an outdated report version, forcing Tom to fix it. "No big deal, Nathan," he said, but I knew I was slipping. I told myself to be patient, that my wife's family would soon find a new place. Harold mentioned waiting for insurance to settle. Vivian talked about affordable apartments they were considering, and Ethan spoke of a few interviews. I believed them, or at least tried to. I didn't want to think my generosity was being taken advantage of. But the small signs kept piling up. One evening, I noticed the cable bill spike because Harold added a sports package. "I thought you'd enjoy watching games," he said, when I asked. "I don't watch sports, but I didn't say so. Just paid the bill and told myself to monitor costs closer." I started noticing other things. Megan's expensive shampoo in the bathroom ran out faster, probably because Lily, Ethan's girlfriend, stayed over often. I hadn't confronted anyone yet, but each small violation felt like a drop filling a glass. I still hoped things would resolve themselves, that my wife's family would keep their promise and leave on time. When the 3-month mark passed, I realized my wife's family had no intention of leaving as promised. The small issues I tried to overlook became gaping wounds, eroding my patience. My house in Pine Hollow, once my sanctuary, now felt like a hotel where I was both owner and servant. I tried talking to Megan, hoping she'd understand, but each time, I felt like the selfish one in my own home. Work pressure, declining health, and marital strain made me wonder how much longer I could keep going like this. Living expenses kept soaring. Electricity, water, and cable bills ate up a huge chunk of my income. Groceries, already pricey, cost even more since Lily, Ethan's girlfriend, stayed over nearly every night. I found unclear charges on my credit card, a gas purchase, a restaurant meal on a day I worked late. When I asked Ethan, he snapped, "I'll pay it back when I get paid. You can afford it, right?" I was stunned, knowing he had no paycheck coming. In total, over $10,000 drained from my savings, money I'd earmarked for an investment project or emergencies. I tried making a budget sheet, but when I showed Megan, she just sighed. "Don't make things so complicated, Nathan. They're struggling." Noise became a nightmare. Harold's TV, Ethan's gaming, and Lily's late-night laughter made it impossible to focus. Once during an important online meeting, the sound of gunfire from Ethan's game rang out, forcing me to mute my mic and apologize to clients. Christine, my boss, started noticing my decline. "Nathan, are you okay?" she asked after a meeting where I sent the wrong document. "You used to be the most reliable on the team," I reassured her, but I knew I was losing ground. A big project was coming up, my chance to get promoted to project director, but I had no time to prepare because I was dealing with chaos at home. My health began to deteriorate. I couldn't sleep, lying awake until 2 a.m., my mind racing with worries about money and work. Headaches became constant companions, forcing me to keep painkillers in my car, office, and bag. My clothes grew loose because I had no appetite. Megan noticed my exhaustion, but when I confided in her, she said, "They're trying, Nathan. It's just a tough phase." I wanted to believe her, but the distance between us grew clearer. She spent more time with her mom and brother, making me feel like an outsider in my own home. I turned to Lucas, my best friend, during a rare lunch. "You're being taken advantage of," he said bluntly, stirring his coffee. "They've turned your house into a hotel, and you're the staff. Are they even looking for a new place?" I couldn't answer, because I knew they weren't. Ethan talked about a few interviews, but Lucas, who knew a friend of Ethan's, revealed he'd turned down a job because the pay wasn't high enough. Harold and Vivian complained about the housing market, but never went to see any apartments. I started questioning things, but every time I brought up the 3-month mark, Megan sighed. "The market's tough, Nathan. They need time." Everything reached a breaking point. One evening after my worst workday, I returned to my house in Pine Hollow, drained after a meeting where Christine, my boss, bluntly criticized me for lagging on a major project, my last shot at the project director role. I just wanted to lock myself in my office, finish a report to salvage things. But when I opened the door, I was stunned. Ethan had turned my space into a gaming corner, with a large monitor, tangled cables, and a gaming chair right in the middle. My desk was shoved against the wall, work documents piled on the floor, some crumpled like they'd been stepped on. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely hiding my anger. Ethan, wearing headphones, didn't even look up. "Wi-Fi's better here," he said. "The living room's not comfy for sleeping, and you hardly use this room." I stood there, blood rushing to my head, feeling like the last piece of my space had been stolen. I tried to stay calm, going to Megan to talk. I suggested a family meeting, hoping to set clear boundaries. "We need to discuss respecting space and costs," I said, keeping my voice steady. Megan shot it down instantly. "Families don't need meetings like coworkers, Nathan," she said, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "You always make a big deal out of things." The conversation quickly escalated into an argument. I listed the issues: over $10,000 in expenses, cluttered belongings, noise, and now my office being taken over. Ethan used my credit card without asking. I exploded. "Harold and Vivian changed the whole house like it's theirs." Megan crossed her arms, her eyes growing cold. "They're my family, Nathan. They're struggling. Do you want them to feel kicked out?" I tried explaining I just wanted mutual respect, but she cut me off. "If you don't like living with family, you can leave," she said, her voice sharp as a knife. "Keep whining about money and space. It's so unmanly." Her words hit like a punch to the chest. I stood frozen, unable to believe Megan, the woman I loved and built a life with for 18 years, told me to leave my own house, the one I paid every mortgage payment for. The room seemed to shrink, leaving only heavy silence and her cold stare. Harold and Vivian, in the living room, pretended not to hear. Ethan, just stepping out, shook his head. "Seriously, Nathan, that's low." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my keys, walked out, feeling like my world had collapsed. The cool evening air in Pine Hollow slapped my face as I got into my car. I reclined the seat, letting the pain swallow me. In the car, I thought about everything. Over $10,000 in expenses, from electric bills to pricey groceries, from car repairs to unnecessary cable channels. Sleepless nights, apologizing to clients for noise, missed work opportunities. I thought about Megan, our college days in love, the Napa Valley trip where she smiled brightly over a glass of wine. Now she sided with her family, seeing me as a selfish complainer. My house, where I planted apple trees and drank coffee in my office, was now a place I had to tiptoe through, afraid of disturbing the new order. I'd become a guest in my own home, and that hurt more than any bill. I sat there for hours, watching the house lights go out. Harold and Vivian went to bed. Ethan and Lily laughed for a while, then fell silent. Megan didn't come looking for me. I wondered where I'd gone wrong, if I was as selfish as they said. But then, a painful clarity emerged. I couldn't keep going like this. I'd sacrificed too much money, health, career, even love, to sustain a situation that only benefited them. The house was mine, but I'd let them take it. I couldn't change them, but I could change the situation. When dawn broke over Pine Hollow streets, I woke up, body aching from sleeping in the car, but my mind clearer than ever. I couldn't keep letting my wife's family take over my house, career, and health. I didn't want to be their enemy, but I needed to take back my life. I drove to a coffee shop in downtown Willow Creek, opened my laptop and started planning. The first step was understanding my finances. I called Rebecca, a financial advisor who'd helped me buy the Pine Hollow house. I sent her a detailed spreadsheet: electric, water, cable bills, expensive groceries, car repairs, and unclear credit card charges. Over $10,000 in 8 months is significant, Nathan, Rebecca said after reviewing. Financially, this isn't sustainable. You're draining savings meant for investments or emergencies. We talked for hours. The house was in my name, making things legally clear but emotionally complex. Rebecca advised consulting a lawyer to know my rights. You need to protect your assets and future, she said. I agreed, feeling a slight relief with a clear path forward. I contacted Thomas, a real estate lawyer Rebecca recommended. Meeting at his office, a quiet contrast to the chaos at home, felt safe. As the sole owner, you can require them to leave, Thomas explained. A formal notice with a reasonable deadline like 30 days is enough. If they don't comply, you could pursue eviction, but that's a last resort, especially with family. I took careful notes. What's a reasonable deadline? I asked. 30 days is standard, he replied. But offering more time, like for elderly in-laws, shows good faith to a court. Documenting the initial agreement and expenses strengthens your case if disputes arise. I nodded, picturing the notice, but my heart sank thinking of facing Megan. To protect myself, I decided to find a separate space. I called Lisa, a real estate agent Lucas, my best friend, recommended. I need a small apartment, available now, preferably with security, I said. Budget's flexible, but safety's priority. Lisa worked fast, sending me a list of apartments that day. During lunch breaks, I viewed 3, settling on a 1-bedroom at Oak Ridge Towers, a high-security complex in Willow Creek. The apartment was small but bright, with a park-view window and keycard locks. The landlord wants to rent immediately, Lisa said. Sign today, you'll have keys by the weekend. I agreed, feeling like I'd reclaimed a piece of freedom. Renting it cost more than planned, but the piece it offered was worth every penny. I started moving important items out of the house. Over a few days, when I knew the house was empty, I quietly took work documents, family heirlooms, like my grandmother's wedding ring, and some personal belongings. I rented a storage unit near Oak Ridge Towers to keep them, with Lucas's help. Feels like a covert mission, he joked as we organized the unit. It really does, I admitted. I never thought I'd sneak around my own house. Lucas patted my shoulder. You're doing what's necessary. Don't let guilt stop you. I also asked Mr. James, a retired cop neighbor, to keep an eye on the house after I moved. Families can be tricky, he said, when I briefly explained. I'll let you know if anything's off. To prepare mentally, I sought Dr. Susan, a therapist specializing in family conflict. In our first session, she asked, Nathan, when was the last time you felt at ease in your home? I couldn't answer. She helped me see I'd enabled my family's dependence out of guilt and duty. Generosity is great, but sacrificing yourself isn't sustainable, she said. You need to protect yourself before resentment ruins your relationships. Her words were a lifeline, giving me strength to move forward. I began drafting the 30-day notice, including the $10,000 expense list and photos of the house's condition as Thomas advised. I also confided in Christine about the situation. I'm having family issues affecting work, I said. She nodded, her voice sincere. Take 3 days off next week, Nathan. Sort it out, then come back with your old energy. The promotion board meets end of quarter. You still have a shot. Her empathy fueled my resolve. I transferred the deposit and first month's rent for the apartment, opening a separate account the family didn't know about. Confirming the transaction on my office computer, I felt a weight lift. For the first time in months, I was in control of my life. That night, I steeled myself for the upcoming confrontation. I rehearsed what I'd say, anticipating Megan's reactions, anger, tears, or blame, and planned my responses. I cooked dinner as usual, hiding any hint of my plan, Lying in bed, in a house now filled with people who no longer felt like family, I felt an unexpected calm. The road ahead would be tough, but I knew I was doing the right thing. Tomorrow would be a big challenge, but I was ready. Freedom, something I'd nearly forgotten, awaited me. That morning, soft sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains, but I felt like I was gearing up for battle. In my hand was the 30-day notice, printed on letterhead from Thomas's office, along with a detailed list of over $10,000 in expenses and photos of the house's condition. I wore a dress shirt, as if heading to a company meeting, but this was the most important meeting of my life. I took a deep breath, walked downstairs, carrying my resolve to reclaim my house and life. The smell of coffee and toast wafted from the kitchen. Vivian was preparing a weekend breakfast, a rare habit kept from their early days here. The whole family, Megan, Harold, Vivian, Ethan and Lily, was gathered around the dining table. Ethan and Lily shared a newspaper, Harold worked a crossword, and Megan poured orange juice. The scene looked peaceful, but I knew it was built on my sacrifices. "Good morning," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. "Before we eat, I need to discuss something important." Vivian paused, spatula in hand. "Can't it wait until after breakfast, Nathan? The toast will get cold." I shook my head, meeting their eyes. "No, it can't wait any longer." I sat at the head of the table, placing the documents in front of me. "I've made a decision about us living together," I said, looking at each of them. "This arrangement isn't working anymore, financially or emotionally. This is a formal notice requesting everyone leave the house within 30 days. The air froze. Megan stared, eyes wide. Ethan dropped the paper, face flushing red. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came. Harold stopped his crossword. I continued, voice steady. "I've also prepared a list of expenses I've covered, over $10,000, and photos of the house's condition. Page 2 lists affordable apartments, including senior housing for mom and dad, and subsidized units for Ethan." The reaction erupted immediately. Megan stood up abruptly, her voice trembling. "Are you serious, Nathan? After all my family's done for you, you're kicking us out like trash?" I tried to stay calm. "I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm giving a reasonable deadline and a list of options, more than what you all did when you changed my house without asking." Ethan slammed the table. "This is nonsense. Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? You think it's that easy?" I responded, my voice firm. "Go where you planned to go when you promised to stay here temporarily, 8 months ago." Vivian started crying. "My son-in-law treating us like strangers. What will the neighbors think?" I looked straight at her. "They'll think I opened my home to help family through a crisis, but that help was taken advantage of to the point I had to set boundaries." Harold finally spoke, his voice soft. "Nathan, surely we can talk this out. We're family." I turned to him. "We've talked for months. Every time I asked for respect, I was seen as a complainer. This is my house, my mortgage, my investment. I'm not leaving, but you all have to." Ethan pushed his chair back, standing up, the chair scraping the wooden floor. "You've changed, Nathan. You used to care about family. Now it's just money in this damn house." Lily tugged his arm, whispering, "Calm down, Ethan," but he brushed her off. "No, I want to hear Mr. Perfect brother-in-law explain how he justifies this." I opened the document, pulling out another sheet. "I'm willing to help with the move, 2 weeks in a hotel if needed, and part of the deposit for a new place. But the condition is the house must be returned as shown in the photos, all belongings cleared before the deadline." Megan burst into tears, her voice choked. "You're calculating like a stranger. After 18 years together, you treat me like this?" I looked at her, my heart aching but kept my voice steady. "This isn't about money, Megan. It's about boundaries and respect, things that haven't existed in this house for months." The conversation dragged on for over 2 hours, stuck in a cycle of accusations, blame, and attempts to negotiate. I held my ground, referencing the documents and deadline. Finally, I stood up. "You can review the documents. Tomorrow we'll discuss practical questions. This decision is non-negotiable." I left, saying I had work to do, though I just wanted to escape the stifling atmosphere. The backlash came swiftly. My phone flooded with messages from Megan's relatives. Aunt Clara called me ungrateful. Uncle Henry texted that I needed to get my head checked. Some distant relatives posted vague social media rants about kids betraying family. I turned off notifications, focusing on settling into the apartment at Oak Ridge Towers. In the days that followed, they tried to sabotage my decision. Vivian accidentally broke a framed picture of my grandmother's. Ethan loudly insisted they needed more time. Harold pleaded for family harmony, but no one looked for a new place. I countered by sending the notice via certified mail, photographing the house's condition, and installing security cameras in common areas after informing them. Thomas said these measures were a bit much for family, but necessary in this situation. The 30-day deadline passed with tension and reluctant progress. I stayed at Lucas's, only visiting to check progress. The day before the deadline, I saw boxes piled at the entrance, a sign they were moving. Harold nodded to me, his eyes more tired than angry. "We'll be out by noon tomorrow," he said as I checked the nearly empty living room. "Cleaning service comes in the afternoon." I nodded, surprised by this thoughtfulness. He hesitated, his voice low. "This wasn't what I wanted. Thank you, and I'm sorry." I looked at him, seeing rare sincerity. "It's not the end, Dad," I said carefully, "just resetting boundaries." He didn't reply, but his eyes showed he understood, at least partly. 6 months after my wife's family left, I stood in my Pine Hollow house, feeling a peace I thought I'd lost forever. The house was mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. I painted the walls a soft blue, rearranged furniture to reflect myself, and turned the living room, once Harold and Vivian's bedroom, into a reading nook with a small sofa and wooden bookshelf. The apple and mint garden was tended again, becoming my morning sanctuary. I didn't feel victorious, but the relief of reclaiming my space and self was worth more than any joy. My work bounced back quickly. Christine noticed the change immediately, praising my renewed focus and energy. "You're back, Nathan," she said, after a meeting where I delivered a flawless report. At quarter's end, I was promoted to project director, with a higher salary and greater responsibilities. Colleagues like Tom started seeking my advice, a rarity during those chaotic months. I didn't share much about my struggles, but they sensed I'd overcome a major hurdle. My career, once nearly lost, was now a solid foundation for the future. I continued therapy with Dr. Susan, shifting from crisis management to healing. "Family's tough because they're tied to our identity," she said, in one session. "You're doing the hard work, redefining relationships on healthy terms." Megan and I started couples therapy, a slow but necessary step. At first she was angry, feeling I'd betrayed her family. But through talks, she began to see I wasn't against them, just protecting myself. We're rebuilding trust, step by step, based on mutual respect. One evening, she held my hand, saying, "I'm sorry I didn't see how much you were enduring." It wasn't a promise of perfection, but a start to mending. My wife's family slowly changed too. Harold and Vivian settled into a senior apartment. They barely contacted me at first, sending only resentful texts. But Ethan, surprisingly, matured. After moving out, he found steady work at a small tech firm, though the pay was below his expectations. He had to cover rent, manage expenses, and learn independence. Over a rare coffee, he said, "I get it now, Nathan. Budgeting, cleaning, all the stuff you mentioned. It's different when you do it yourself." Not quite an apology, but I saw growth. "You always had potential," I said, "just needed a push to show it." Our relationship's still fragile, but moving toward mutual respect as adults. Harold reached out more, starting with practical questions about apartment fixes, then turning to sincere talks. "Over lunch, just us two," he said. "Megan won't admit it, but this was necessary. We leaned on you too much instead of facing our issues." I nodded, feeling his sincerity. "I just wanted everyone to stand strong," I replied. He gripped my hand briefly. "I should have backed you. I stayed quiet when I needed to speak. I'm sorry." That simple apology meant a lot, opening the door to a healthier relationship. Nathan Carter's story, a 45-year-old software engineer in Willow Creek, California, mirrors the real challenges many Americans face today, balancing family duties and personal needs amid economic pressures and a culture that values family. Nathan's opening his home to his in-laws, Harold and Vivian, and wife's brother, Ethan, after a financial crisis, from medical bills to job loss, shows the deep family values in America, where helping kin and hardship is common. Yet, the $10,000 cost, space encroachment, Ethan taking the office, Vivian reorganizing the kitchen, and Megan's sharp words, "If you don't like living with family, you can leave," highlight the clash between generosity and personal boundaries. An increasingly urgent issue as living costs soar, like pricey groceries, doubled utility bills, and living spaces shrink in suburbs like Pine Hollow. The lesson from this story is to set clear boundaries early to protect mental and financial health, especially in American culture, where individuals often feel pressured to prioritize family. Nathan delayed confrontation, fearing being seen as selfish, leading to insomnia, declining work performance, and marital strain. His actions, consulting a lawyer, Thomas, financial advisor Rebecca, and therapy with Dr. Susan, show the value of seeking professional support, a growing practice in America. Nathan's recovery, from rebuilding his home to earning a project director promotion, proves setting boundaries isn't rejecting family, but fostering healthy relationships. Americans today can apply this by agreeing upfront on timelines, responsibilities, and costs when aiding family, while prioritizing personal well-being to avoid burnout, as Nathan learned through his painful but necessary journey. Subscribe to the channel to follow my journey of building family boundaries and reclaiming my life, along with practical lessons from this experience. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video to keep exploring how to balance love and self-protection.